You can't tell the story of William H. Bonney without mentioning Jesse Evans. He's often cast as the counterpart to Billy the Kid in the Lincoln County War. However, details of the Gunslinger are often scarce. So today I'm sitting down with author and historian James B. Mills to dig into the truth. What we actually know about Billy and Jesse, where they first crossed paths, and what their relationship was actually like. Now, along the way, James shares some lesser known and quite hilarious stories about Billy. You won't want to miss those. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Well, how would you describe, based on what you know about Jesse, how would you kind of describe him?
A ruffian in every sense of the word. He was one rough hombre. He was a pitiless killer. He did apparently have kind of a grim humor that appealed to some people. There were some people did like him, but he was ruthless, absolutely ruthless, and he was more outlaw than Bonney was in that sense. He really was. Jesse would rob stagecoaches, kind of things, and he'd shoot people that didn't have it coming. So, yeah, Jesse was he was one rough pecker. I'll put it that way. He was supposedly about. We don't actually have a photo of him, not a confirmed photo. So, I know there's some out there where people say, "Oh, it could be him," but he was supposedly about 5'7". And there was supposedly a story that he might have been half, part Cherokee. Don't know if that's true or not. And we don't even know for certain exactly where he came from, where he was born, where he grew up. But he was a bad motherfucker. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah, definitely fair to say. Was he as famous or maybe even more well known during their time as Billy, you think?
In 1877, yes. Yeah, he was definitely more famous than Billy Bonney in 1877. And probably throughout the first half of 1878, probably. As Bonney's fame, he was known throughout like a lot of parts of New Mexico, but his actual fame, like Billy the Kid, that didn't actually happen until about 6-7 months before he was killed. So. But if you're asking, like, at any point, was Jesse more famous than the two? Absolutely. In 1877, 1876, nobody knew Kid Antrim was. He was a nobody pretty much, except for a few people here and there. But, yeah, so Jesse was more famous of the two at one point, briefly.
Wow, interesting. So how did they first cross paths together, Billy and Jesse?
Well, in January 1863, there's a place called Fort McLean. It was just about 12 miles southwest of Silver City in southwestern New Mexico. And it was an army fort. And in January 1863, an Apache war leader known as Mangus Coloradus, which means red sleeves in Espanol, which he was given the name by the Spanish, much like the Spanish also gave Geronimo his name. Well, in Fort McLean, Mangus had come in under a flag of truce to talk peace terms, and the commander there, who was he instructed the troops, I want this guy dead. I want him dead by morning. He was brutally tortured. He had razor-burning bayonets tucked to his feet, and he was brutally murdered, and his head was cut off and actually sent to a phrenologist in New York. And, that was at Fort McLean in 1863. Well, 14 years later, it was in the exact same place, which by then was no longer Fort McLean. It was known as Apache Tejo in southwestern Nuevo Mexico. And that was the place, over 14 years later, where Billy Bonney and Jesse Evans first crossed paths in September 1877. So a little bit of history there tied to the place where they met. But that's where they first met in the fall of 1877. Bonney had just recently returned to New Mexico after shooting Frank Cahill in self-defense. Jesse was known banditti. He was leading his gang called the Boys. They were a very, very, very rough bunch of outlaws. And Bonney made Jesse's acquaintance, and pretty soon the kid was riding with the boys, with Jesse and the boys, although it wasn't for long. It was only about 6, maybe 8 weeks. They weren't really Bonnie's crowd, truth be told. They just weren't, yeah. They just weren't, yeah. I mean, Bonney was a thief. He would steal horses, but as funny as it sounds, I think at that time, the boys, they were actually too rough for Billy the Kid. He was just, so he started looking for work instead, and eventually ended up under the employer, John Tunstall.
Yeah, I think when I read El Bandido Simpatico, that's kind of what I gathered is Billy was with them, but he kind of I think the friendship angle between Billy and Jesse, at least in my opinion, is kind of overblown. I don't think
very much.
Yeah, I didn't think Billy was really feeling their vibe when he was there, and he just kind of dipped out, it seemed like.
It's not just that. Bonney at that time, or Henry Antrim, as he was pretty much Kid Antrim, as he was known at that time, he was in the process at that point of taking on the alias William H. Bonney. He was a nobody.
Yeah.
Jesse Evans and a lot of the boys, they were known across the territory. The kid this is a 16-year-old waif. Yeah, he was good with a gun.
Yeah.
And so, but it was more a case, I think, of him tagging along with them. The idea that the kid would, at that point in his life, and I think that's been built up so much more because of his towering reputation as Billy the Kid that developed years later, that we've kind of played him up like the suggestion that he would have ever been on an equal standing with Jesse Evans at that point in time is ridiculous. It would have been like a high school student suddenly riding with the Hells Angels.
Right.
Yeah, that's just not. So he was more like just a tag along kind of guy, and him and Jesse were, did have a reasonable relationship. But this idea, like, forget the television show, that ridiculous series that's out now. If people are enjoying it, that's up to them. But just don't take it seriously historically.
Yeah.
It was. That has. You're right. You hit that on the head. It has been exaggerated.
Yeah, it seemed like to me, Billy was just kind of wandering around from place to place. He was an orphan at that point. He was just trying to find something to eat and, kind of keep busy around that time. So, but with that said, how did they end up on different sides when the Lincoln County War broke out? How did that kind of transpire and everything there?
Well, long before the Lincoln County War broke out, Jesse Evans and the boys, they were Dolan's guys. They were all very closely associated with the house, with Jimmy Dolan and Riley and Murphy and them. And the kid had, as I said, he'd broken off from the group. He'd gone to Frank Coe's ranch looking for work, found a bit of work there for a little while. He'd even applied to work under Bill Morton down at the Murphy cattle camp. He got turned away. Bill Morton accused the kid of trying to cut in on his lady friend. Whether or not Bonnie did, I don't know. But
right.
There's a chance. But which really pissed the kid off, actually. And he was kind of just wandering around. He met the Casey family, and eventually he stole a couple of mules from the Tunstall Ranch. And he supposedly, the story goes that he got arrested for that. And Tunstall came in to talk to him and offered him a job because Tunstall was desperate for employees. And I think if that's the way it went, I think Tunstall, his thought process might have been, well, this kid has been riding with Jesse Evans and those guys that are stealing from me. He might know a bit about how they work. I don't know. But, George Coe, according to him, Tunstall took a real liking to the kid. Frank Coe said that, the kid and him developed a rapport, him and Tunstall, although they weren't father and son, but there was clearly a rapport there. And then, of course, Tunstall got murdered a few months later, and Bonney was firmly on the Tunstall side by that point. The boys were still very much with the house and Jimmy Dolan. Jesse Evans and Jimmy Dolan were very close. They were good buddies.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, speaking of the Tunstall Billy relationship, when I really read that part of Billy's story, it's kind of sad, man, because it really seemed like he was on the cusp of going straight. I think, if I remember right, it was him and was it Fred?
He did go.
Yeah, they were talking about getting a farm and everything together, and it seemed like
he did go straight. Yeah, he took the most of that opportunity with Tunstall, and there was talks he was going to either. Can't be 100% certain, but he was going to be living at a ranch with another regulator, Fred White, who Bonney particularly liked, and they were down on the Rio Penasco. They were going to supposedly have a ranch. They were in the process of setting that up very right at the time when Tunstall was murdered. So he did take that shot, but then Tunstall got murdered, and that changed everything. So,
yeah, tough break. Speaking of the murder, now, am I correct? Was it Jesse Evans that fired the first shot that shot John Tunstall?
The only way we're going to know that for absolute certain is if we build a time machine.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the conclusion that I drew based on my investigation into the Angel files of Tunstall's murder. Now, I got that from testimony from Alexander McSween, who, when he spoke to the government agent, stated that he had heard from one of the posse men on the other side, Tom Green, who was helping gathering horses when Tunstall was shot, and may have been a partial eyewitness to the shooting. Well, apparently this is according to McSween, according to Tom Green, Jesse Evans was the one who fired the first shot with the rifle. Of course, others said it was Tom Hill. It's important to remember that when that investigation began, Hill was dead. He was buried beneath the ground. So he was a very easy guy to sort of say, oh, yeah, he was the one who shot Tunstall first. Yeah, right. But the indication to me, as I wrote it in both books, is that it appeared to me, Occam's razor applying, that Jesse Evans likely was the first shooter, and Bill Morton was the one who fired the shot that in the back of Tunstall's head.
Makes sense. And then, there was a lot of extracurriculars there, if I remember right, with what they did with Tunstall's body and the horse, and, it was Tunstall's favorite horse and all that stuff. You think all that stuff kind of played into Billy's reaction, just like further pissed him off and really sent him over the edge there? Or what do you think?
I think it pissed them all off. Dick Brewer was furious. Dick Brewer, when they caught Morton and Baker, Dick Brewer told them straight out that he was sorry they'd surrendered because he had no intention of taking them alive.
Right.
You see, Dick Brewer was for his time and place, was a very stand-up guy, but he wasn't a saint. He was still a man of his times, and Dick Brewer was furious. Bonney was livid. Bonney wanted to go after, and he didn't have time for let's arrest these guys, let's kill them. Yeah. I think all the regulators were, and Fred White, he was the one who shot Heineman in the street when they killed Brady.
Yeah.
They were all pretty angry, and with what they did with Tunstall's body, they laid him under a clock. He was going to bed, and they put his horse's hat apparently under the horse's head.
Right.
Yeah, it was all pretty derogatory stuff. And I think the kid, according to Frank Coe, when they brought Tunstall's body in to the McSween house, this was according to Frank Coe, Bonney walked up and he just looked at him and said, I'll get some of them before I die. And he just turned away. So, and he did. He did get some of them before he died.
Yeah, he did. Now we know what pissed the regulators off and kind of, transpired the Lincoln County War. But looking at it from the House side, I've heard people ask, what was the House's angle in all this? Is it as black and white as it's kind of portrayed with Tunstall and McSween being the good guys and the House being the bad guys and all that stuff? Or is there a little more nuance to it?
There's a lot of nuance to it. There was absolutely no excuse for John Tunstall's murder. That was inexcusable. Right. You can't justify that. Now, of course, the posse claim that Tunstall fired on them first. I don't think you have to be Stephen Hawking to you read that evidence. It's just reeks of bullshit. But the issue leading up to that, if you go from, say, February 17th, the day before Tunstall was murdered, back, there was a lot of nuance. It was not black and white at all. Alexander McSween was a shyster. He was a swindler. And we don't know for absolute certain because the funds were never found. But it does appear that he probably did embezzle the Fritz insurance funds. And as far as Dolan is concerned, they believe that he did that to help stock Tunstall's store. The Lincoln County War, people call it a cattle war. People call it, a merchant war. It was actually an insurance fund. That's really what started it. That's what William Reinerson, an ally of the House, a member of the Santa Fe Ring, when he sent a letter to Dolan and them telling, shortly before Tunstall was killed, it was pretty much a declaration of war. And he mentioned, about the funds. That's what the primary motivation was. But I think the house, Jimmy Dolan, they saw Tunstall as this pretentious, pompous sort of Englishman, keeping in mind that they were Irish Catholic,
right?
Who was going to come in and basically take over what they had, felt that they were entitled to, knowing, what had happened in their homeland before. Lawrence Murphy lived through the famine, and I think they saw Tunstall. They tried to be friendly at first, but I think they saw Tunstall as his ambitions were a threat to their holding on things. And McSween and John Chisholm was no saint. John Chisholm actually probably stole more livestock than Billy Bonney ever saw in his life.
Yeah.
In fact, Jesse Evans had worked for John Chisholm as a cowboy, and Jesse Evans testified to an agent that, and this was documented by an agent, Erwin Curtis Watkins, that Chisholm had been sending Jesse Evans and like a lot of his cowboys to Indian reservations to steal ponies and all sorts. So, but as far as the black and white thing, I think if you read Tunstall's diaries, his diary entry and his letters that Frederick Nolan published years later, he really wasn't that likable of a guy. He was, and I'll say this, and this is something that really needs to be, I think, said. Tunstall and McSween and Chisholm, they wanted to usurp the house and take over like their position as the top guys in Lincoln County, but they did not want to do that to make things better for everyone else. They wanted to do that so that they could reap the exact same benefits that the house had been benefiting. So you basically had two sides that were pretty unscrupulous in a lot of ways. It was just that one side was willing to carry out murder. I don't think Tunstall was willing to actually tell his guys, go murder that man to achieve his aims. Dolan was. And Brady, of course, was right in the thick of that. So I think that's ultimately the difference. So you could say the McSween faction, their side, they did have a bit more of the moral high ground, but in terms of leading up to that, it was pretty even keel in terms of greed and trying to form a ring. Tunstall himself said he wanted to form a ring. So
well, you mentioned the Santa Fe ring. Can you kind of, like, for people that aren't as familiar with that, can you kind of tell us who exactly made up the Santa Fe ring and what made them as powerful as they were at that time?
Well, Thomas B. Catron was the leading figure of the Santa Fe ring, and Elkins, Stephen Benjamin Elkins, who was his partner. There were other members. Reinerson was one. It was a conglomerate of attorneys in Santa Fe who pretty much. Thomas Catron had studied the land grants extensively. That these were shrewd guys, and he ended up being the largest landholder in the Southwest. So they damaged a lot of people's lives. They pretty much just ran the territory, and nobody was able to usurp. Even Lew Wallace, when he arrived in Santa Fe after he was appointed governor, which was not a job he wanted, he wrote in a letter, he said, I've arrived here with a ring. There's a ring with its throat on the territory, and they just nobody was there. There was a lot of rebellions against it. You had the Colfax County War, and then you had the Lincoln County War. Then you had the Whitecaps uprising, which I wrote about in the new book. In later years, that's pretty much sums up, without getting too complicated. That's what they were. It was they turned New Mexico into their own personal political tributary.
It was crazy when you read about it and stuff and looking at that. So kind of circling back to Jesse a little bit, there's definitely, obviously Billy was great with his Colt and his Winchester, but then there's like this narrative out there I see a lot that Billy was maybe a little scared of Jesse and that Jesse was better with the gun than Billy. What do you think? Is that true, or is that just kind of BS that's overblown? Or
as far as the gunmanship, the kid was good. He was very good. There were multiple eyewitnesses who remembered watching him throw a can up in the air, and he would empty his revolver, and then the can would come down and had 6 holes in it, 6 holes in it. So he was very, very good. Whether or not he was better than Jesse or who was better than who, we'll never know. I mean, Pat Garrett said Bonney was good, but he said he also said a lot of other guys were really good. But Bonney was definitely a crack shot. He was good with a pistol. As far as him being afraid of Jesse, I I don't think so. When a peace meeting occurred, which Bonney actually organised because Lew Wallace couldn't be bothered getting off his ass to go to Lincoln County. It was left to Bonney to do it. He organised a peace meeting, and it was on February 18th, 1879, 1 year to the day after the murder of John Tunstall, in fact. And Bonney and a few of his associates, the former regulators, Yginio Salazar was there, Martin Chavez was probably there, Jose Chavez might have been there. They were all waiting. Of course, Tom Foyard was there. He was always there with the kid.
Right.
And they were waiting, and Jesse and Dolan then came in from Fort Stanton to meet up, and they both took cover behind these walls, at adobe walls, and they were sort of shouting back and forth. Well, Jesse Evans made it very, very clear. He shouted out that, we can't make treaty with this kid, and Evans made it clear. He said, I'm going to kill him. That I intend to kill Bonney. Bonney was recorded. His response was, we came here for the purpose of making peace. I don't intend to open negotiations with a fight, but if you'll come at me 3 at a time, I'll whip the whole damn bunch of you. That was Bonney's response. That doesn't sound to me like he was scared of Jesse Evans. He might have, I think Bonney knew, and Jesse probably felt the same, that, not to turn your back on this guy, keep your guard up. But I don't think he was necessarily scared of Jesse in that sense.
Yeah. I kind of get this feeling that Jesse was a bit of a hothead, and he was kind of a bully. Like, I remember reading about the murder of the McSween's lawyer and everything in the street. I remember there was a point where Jesse
Evans was that night.
Yeah. Oh, the same night. That's right. Yeah. And he had Billy by the neck or whatever, leading him, because Billy wanted to get out of there. If I remember correct. Is that right? That
was reported, that when they bumped into Houston Chapman, who was Susan McSween's lawyer, that Bonney sensed trouble, and Bonney apparently sort of turned to leave, and apparently Jesse sort of said, no, you stay here with us, blah, blah, blah. Bonnie did not want to be a part of that, and he witnessed Houston Chapman got killed. Jesse Evans wasn't the one who shot him.
Right.
But, Jesse was definitely a hothead. He was dangerous. They were all dangerous, I guess.
Right.
He had, I think, a good way of looking at the American frontier, especially the southwestern frontier. When you're talking about men who carried guns, gunmen, whatever, you had rough men and you had rougher men.
Mm.
Now, if I was to sum the two guys up, I guess I would say the kid was a rough man and Jesse was a rougher man.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best way to see it. So, but yeah, Jesse was, I wouldn't want to cross Jesse, but I think Bonney, and Bonney was, after he agreed to testify against Jesse and them for, Dolan and them, he was concerned. He didn't want Jesse and them getting out because he knew they'd shoot him on sight. So, yeah.
So, with the, kind of circling back to the whole friendship thing, we've kind of debunked they weren't exactly very friendly in the first place. But then there's the letter that Jesse Evans sent after he'd been arrested. I believe it was after like a shootout with the Texas Rangers and stuff, and he got locked up. And he sent this letter, and the letter is really kind of perplexing when you think about it, because it's like, what the hell was Jesse thinking here, sending this letter to Billy? And
Well, the last time that Jesse saw Bonney was during the peace meeting when they had successfully made peace, and they'd all entered into a pact that if any of them was arrested, it was your duty to go to the rescue of whoever had been arrested. That was the last time Jesse saw Bonney that night. I think that's what was in Jesse's mind. He was thinking, well, the kid, he's rustling some cattle here and there from Chisholm, who I also hate. Maybe he'll honor the pact. We don't know for certain that letter was sent. If it was, and if Bonney read it, I'm pretty sure the kid would have laughed his ass off. He was not going to go Jesse Evans. That was not going to happen. But and of course, Bonney never did show up in Texas to try to help Jesse Evans. But then why would he? So.
It seems like a little bit of desperation on Jesse's part, probably. He's like, I'm going to take my shot here and see if I can get the kid come bust me out.
Yeah. Bonney would have laughed. He was like, yeah, good luck with that, Jess. That would have been his response.
So I know we don't really have much information. What is kind of based on everything you've read, and maybe kind of your just educated guess, it's purely speculation and stuff. What do you think ultimately happened to Jesse Evans?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I can't. Anything I said would be speculation. There's a ton of bullshit theory and stuff like that. But my principal rules for writing about history is, there's a difference between what you know and what you believe. And that the other one is emotion is the enemy of facts.
Yeah.
The simple fact is Jesse disappeared after he escaped, and we don't know. You'll have, people say, oh, he became this guy, that guy.
Yeah.
The simple fact is, as from a strictly historiographer standpoint, and I was mentored originally by the most hard-nosed historiographer you can imagine, Chuck Usmer, and who I love like a father. And but when he was mentoring me, when I first started writing Bandido Simpatico, I mean, he was tough on me. Like he would even call me names, you little bastard, you different. But it was all for my benefit. He made me a better historian. And if I were to sit here now and start saying, oh, well, I think this, if he sees this, he'll be like, what are you doing? You don't know what happened to Jesse. None of us do. So, I wish I could give you a sexier answer on that, man. But the truth is, we truly don't know. Not serious historians don't know.
Yeah, I appreciate the restraint, because I think that restraint is also kind of a lost quality today. A lot of people do like to speculate and stuff like that, and I think that makes your work even more credible, in my opinion. That you don't speculate. You let the facts and the firsthand accounts and the primary sources kind of speak for themselves, and that's something I appreciate about you.
It's okay to draw a conclusion, as long as you remember that it is just a conclusion. Like I said with Jesse, the conclusion I drew that Jesse was likely the one who first shot Tunstall. But I didn't write, I wrote that, but I explained in the notes how I came to that conclusion. If someone else goes through the same evidence, the same files and records and depositions as I did, and they happen to draw a bit of a different conclusion, doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong any more than it necessarily means I was. But with stuff like that, I don't really like to go into it all that much, because it's just feels like you end up going down a rabbit hole. Yeah. And it's just like Mysterious Dave Mather, It's it's sometimes there's just some answers are not meant to be found. Jesse could have changed his name and moved somewhere else. He could have got killed by on some out on the range, and his body was left to rot. You don't know. You simply don't know.
It's definitely a lot easier to disappear in those days.
It definitely was.
Now, I think there's really not much else to cover with Jesse Evans. Like you said, when I reached out to you, there's not much. So, kind of circling to Billy, what's your favorite Billy the Kid story? Like, of all the research you've done and when you're writing, what was like your favorite thing to write about the kid? What did you enjoy the most? Like, what kind of brought a smile to your face from time to time?
Well, I take it you mean real historical event, not like the bullshit stories.
Right.
There's quite a few. Probably one of my favorites was after he'd escaped jail, when he shot Bell and Ollinger, and he'd ridden out jail, and he was staying at Paco Inaya's ranch house with the Inaya family, about south of Sumner, and he stayed there for a couple of weeks, a week or two at least, it seems, before he actually headed back to Sumner. I'm presuming he might have been thinking, this is presumption, he might have been thinking that Garrett might have been waiting for him in Sumner or checking it out. But and supposedly Bonney, it's recorded, Jesus Silva remembered this, that when strangers would stop by the ranch house, apparently Bonney would pull a rebozo over his head and disguise himself as a girl. And Jesse Evans actually said he made a good one. His hair was kind of long, a little bit longish at the time, and smooth face, and Jesus basically said Bonney made a good girl. So that was, and this was at the time when newspapers across the country and very quickly soon after across the globe were going nuts. You had the most feared desperado in the entire American Southwest, and he's disguising himself as a girl, to avoid detection. I mean, not that, hey, a bit of cross-dressing never hurt anyone, if that's what people can do, each to their own. John Wayne, there was a rumor,
Right.
But I don't know whether it's true or not, but there was a rumor he enjoyed the cross-dressing.
My feelings about John Wayne are the same as yours, believe me.
Well, we won't get into that. We don't want to piss people off.
Speaking of Billy, Billy had the right petite frame. If anybody's going to pull it off, it's probably the kid back then,
Yeah. I mean, these were strangers. I think if friends, people he knew had shown up, they would have might have recognised him. Said, "Bonnie, what the hell are you doing?" But
Right.
yeah, apparently that's one of the little stories. There's another story that I actually uncovered when I was working on Bandido Simpatico, and I think this really kind of illustrates the complexity with this young man who was capable of outright banditry, unabashed banditry, and he was a thief. He wouldn't. He had a kind of set of principles for thievery. He wouldn't steal from anyone who showed him kindness, and he didn't steal from Hispanos. But yeah, this thief, and he was a killer. He clearly had it in him to shoot men. As that he was no different than most other men in that time and place. But there's a story that Henry Hoyt, who knew Bonney and was a pretty straight shooter, that he recalled that on one occasion, a young boy had contracted smallpox outside of Fort Sumner, and he'd been left basically to die on the floor of the Addo house. And when Bonney learned about this, presumably he knew the boy and knew the family. This was according to Henry Hoyt, that Bonney actually rode out and he gathered up the boy and he put him in the back of a wagon and he handed the boy some currency and he paid for the wagon to take the young boy, the Hispano boy, 2 days in the back of a wagon, 2 days ride north to Las Vegas, which is where Dr. Henry Hoyt lived and spent a lot of time to get medical help. And there's a chance, he never specifically stated it, but there's a chance Dr. Henry Hoyt may have been the doctor that Bonney was sending him to, because him and the kid were friends. And according to Henry Hoyt, he got this story of how he ended up in Vegas from the boy, who apparently told it to Hoyt with a lot of tears in his eyes. And Henry Hoyt kind of used that. He told that story when he was interviewing to kind of illustrate, that as John Meadows said, who also knew Bonney, he said that the kid, he could be rough. He said, but there was a real kind streak in him too. He says, I don't know where he got it from, but it was there. Right. And that's another little story. There's a lot of stories about Bonney, but those are two that kind of stick out for me, I guess, in terms of my recent research.
Right. Well, my favorite one is the one from the McSween house, when the McSween house is under siege and there's the fire, and then was it Jose Chavez y Chavez who says you're awfully relaxed right now, you're awfully calm, and then Billy's like, why wouldn't I be? And it was all in Spanish, obviously, and then Billy pulls out the cigarillo and he starts rolling it, and is it Yginio Salazar is just like watching in amazement as Billy rolls the cigarette, and then a piece of the roof falls down and he uses it to the flame to light the cigarette. He says, much obliged. And it's like, and then just kind of looks up with a smile. I mean, I just think it shows how cool and calm that kid was under pressure, man.
I don't know if he actually said much obliged, but the story itself, you could dismiss that as, oh, what fanciful nonsense.
Yeah.
That came directly from Yginio Salazar. That came directly from Yginio, who was in the McSween house when it was on fire. He was in the kitchen with Bonney. He was there.
Yeah.
Now, short of Yginio at the time pulling out as then uninvented iPhone and recording the kid doing it, you really can't get a much closer source than that.
Yeah.
Yginio was there. He was right there with the kid. He got shot 3 times when they were escaping the house. But apparently Bonney did that I think it was a joke. He sort of smiled at Yginio. I think he was doing it to try to, relax, guys. We're not dead yet. We got a shot. Yeah. And of course, Bonney did make it out there, and so did Jose. Yginio did survive getting shot 3 times. But, that's definitely a good story. I remember when I watched the King Vidor film, the 1930 kid film with Johnny Mac Brown, and that was up to the siege scene, and they'd actually included that Johnny Mac Brown leaned down to light a cigarette on a piece of debris, and I went, whoa, because the movie's full of a lot of crap. But when that came, I was like, whoa, I said, they got that right. Yginio remembered that. But that is a hell of a story. Yginio remembered that the kid pretty much throughout that whole siege, it was like he was playing a game. Bonney was just really cool under that pressure and just, let's just keep fighting, boys.
It seemed like Bonney liked to have a little fun with Yginio too, kind of like show off a little bit and everything based on some of the stories that he took. Yeah, so I think the kid was having some fun with him, like you said.
Well, yeah, I mean, him and Yginio, it would have been by process of elimination. It would have been at Christmas 1879, because at Christmas 1880, Bonney was in Garrett custody, and at Christmas 1878. Actually, Bonney was in Tascosa, so not in Tascosa, but yeah. Anyway, Bonney and Yginio they were heading into Fort Sumner in a little wagon with a very powerful horse, and the horse actually got spooked and it ended up pulling him. The wagon tipped over. They were trying to get there really quick, to Sumner really quick. They wanted the party, the festive, fiesta. And Yginio described it as, they wanted to, chuck some lady under the chin. That was how he described it. They were both swinging bachelors,
Right.
and they were trying to get there a little too fast. And they veered off on a turn, and the wagon tipped over. Well, when the wagon tipped over, that spooked the horse. And the horse actually dragged them another 53 feet or so through the snow. Yginio got up covered in snow. He had a big clump of snow on his head and everything, and he was cussing in Spanish. Like, he was really pissed off. Bonney got up laughing his ass off. He thought it was hilarious. And he thought the whole thing was really funny. And he looked at Yginio and he said to Yginio, he said, "Don't worry, amigo." He said, "I'll dust you off." And he actually drew his gun and shot the snow off Yginio's head, and the kid just laughed. And of course, Yginio laughed too. What else could he do? And he said later, he said, Billy was a great fellow. And he said, what did he say? Yginio said that Bonney, he made you ashamed of yourself to lose your temper in his presence. Bonney always, that aspect of Emilio Estevez's performance in the Young Guns films, where even at the heaviest, most, doomsday moments, Emilio's Billy still finds a bit of humor in it. The soldiers show up and he tells, Dudley to kiss his ass and still laughing about it. That part does sound accurate in terms of what we got from his contemporaries. That Bonney he saw the humor in any situation. Even when Garrett captured him, Bonney still remained in pretty good spirits. I think the only time he appears to have been a bit pissy was when he actually got sentenced to death. Yeah. Sentenced to hang in La Masia. But, of course, that's not where he didn't get hanged.
Right. Hell of a life, man. Hell of a life. Speaking of Garrett, do you think how history kind of looks back on Pat? Do you think he's kind of looked back on fairly? I know he's oftentimes labeled a traitor or a coward for shooting Billy in the dark and those type of things. Do you think that's fair?
Pat Garrett was not a coward. If someone says that, it is unfair. Pat Garrett openly admitted that he was scared. Yeah. That he was terrified that night. He was terrified when he shot Bonney. He was afraid to find the kid. That's why he wanted to leave at one point. He openly admitted that, which took a lot of gumption on Garrett's part. But the fact is, he was scared, but he still kept going. And that's, as I understand it, is a definition of courage. So Pat Garrett was not a coward. I will say this, and I kind of touched on this in Bandido Simpatico. If Billy Bonney had figured out who that was sitting on the side of Maxwell's bed, if he realised that was Pat, Bonney would have opened fire.
Oh, yeah.
He would have shot Garrett short. So it's not like, Garrett didn't give Bonney any less shrift than the kid would have done if roles had been reversed. And if Bonney had seen Garrett, if he'd spotted Garrett that night snooping around somewhere, how do you think the kid would have handled it? Yeah. He wouldn't have jumped on a horse and rode away. He would be like, okay, Pat, I'm going to go around this corner here. Hello, Pat. It was, so he wasn't a coward. Whether or not he was a traitor, I wouldn't describe him as that. I think he was a guy who just decided he wanted to pursue a different path, a better life, as a lawman, and he did that. Bonney went his way, Garrett went his. Garrett did like the kid. Yeah. He did like him. Even one of his longtime deputies said that years later, Joseph Lee. He said, I know that he did like the kid. And this was a guy who'd worked with Garrett for years. He said, I know that he did like the kid, and it did bother him to have to kill him. Didn't bother him too much because he tried to shoot him at Stinking Springs. Right. He shot Bowdry thinking it was Bonney. But he said he did like the kid. And even Garrett said later, he said that, there were a lot of good traits about Billy. He said, I've met far worse men than him. Yeah. He said Garrett even said he wasn't actually what you'd call a killer. That's Pat Garrett saying that. Yeah. And but they were never best friends or anything. So Pat, as I wrote in Bandido Simpatico, it's kind of, the problem is Bonney just had more of an outgoing personality. He had a lot more charisma, and he lived a bit more, even though he lived a lot shorter life, his life was a lot more colourful. Yeah. And, so it's just, and he also was blessed with the name Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
That's a lot easier and memorable than Pat Garrett. It's just a better name. So,
Right.
and Bonnie's story was made for the silver screen. And as I wrote, there was some serious accuracy in that line from Emilio at the end of Young Guns 2, where he says to William Peterson playing Pat Garrett, he says, you remember something, Pat? You'll never be me. You'll only be the man that shot Billy the Kid. That's true.
You remember something, Pat? You'll never be me. You'll only be the man that shot Billy the Kid.
But Pat, he's still famous. Pat actually resented his fame in the end for shooting Bonney. It drove him insane. He couldn't go anywhere without people pestering him, asking questions about the kid. And if you look through extensively through the newspaper reports of that period after Bonney's death, as I have, you couldn't really see Pat Garrett's name mentioned in any story, in any report where it wasn't, where Bonney's name wasn't mentioned. Bonnie's ghost, not literally, pretty much followed Pat the rest of his days, and Pat died a pretty tragic figure. It was, But so no, I don't think Pat was a coward. Bonnie wasn't a coward either. I think that they were two guys that were doing what they felt they had to do to survive, and that's all that any man felt, did what he had to do to survive in those days.
Yeah, different times for sure. Well, you mentioned Emilio a couple times, and I know from listening to some of your previous interviews and stuff, Young Guns was kind of your inspiration that kind of brought you into the Billy the Kid universe and everything. How do you feel about Young Guns 3 now kind of being in the works?
Be interesting. As I wrote in Bandido Simpatico, a story like this for this third film, it can only take, for me as a historian, Billy Bonney into a fantasy realm. But then so did Old Henry. And I really like that movie. I really like Old Henry. I think that was really well done.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a really good, fun what-if movie. And for me, that's how I'll view Guns 3. I'll see it as, it's a fun what-if film. Yeah. And, it should be interesting. I expect it'll be entertaining, hopefully. Hopefully it'll be good. And I guess we'll all just have to wait and see how, see what happens with it.
I'm kind of the opinion, we mentioned the MGM show a little bit. And at first, when I started watching it, like I was not really feeling it. But then I'm like, you know what? Even a dramatized, or what do you say, reimagined Billy the Kid show, it's still a Billy the Kid show. We're still getting some Billy content that kind of pays tribute and everything. And that's kind of how I feel about Young Guns, I think. And I'm with you on Old Henry. Old Henry is like one of my favorite Westerns. Like, I just thought it was such a fun movie.
Old Henry's a fun film. That's pure fiction. Young Guns, both those Young Guns films, the first two, they were artistic impressions of historical events, and they were damn fine artistic impressions. They were damn good.
Oh, yeah.
John Fusco, who's my friend, John Fusco, he actually he dedicated himself to getting a lot of little things right. The costuming was brilliant. Even like little things like Juan Patron's name being mentioned in the first line in the film by Tunstall. You don't see Juan Patron, but his name's mentioned. And even when Kiefer says, he's got to write Dick's mother in Vermont. Of course, Brewer's family were from Vermont. Little things like that, you could tell that Fusco did his research. The series, look, I'll be honest, I only lasted 3 episodes, and I had to turn it off. And I'll be honest, look, anyone out there who likes the series and enjoying it, each to their own. This is just my perspective. It's all subjective. I personally thought it was good TV. Mm-hmm. I thought the characters, what really kind of put me off was, I think, like the stepfather, Henry Antrim, his name, he could not have been any more of a cliched evil stepfather if they tried. And it was just a bit wooden and stiff for me. But from what I have learned about the rest of the series since, really at times they veered so far from the historical record, they may as well just change the characters' names. Yeah. And just made it an official show. But it does get Billy's name out there. And I've heard from a couple of people who said, that they got into Billy through the show, so they bought my book. I was like, nice. Okay, well, fair enough. The book's very, very different from the show. The real history is a lot different from that. But so it's all good in perspective. I don't care for the show myself, but others do. Hey, more to them. But I mean, there was other people I know who didn't like Old Henry, and I enjoyed that movie. So I like seeing the kid in Bill and Ted. Their Excellent
Yeah.
Adventure. I think that was actually a pretty accurate portrayal. You know, he tries to hit on girls at a shopping mall and fires his gun, gets thrown in jail. You know, I'm like, yeah, that's the kid if you transport him to 1988.
Sounds good, Mr. the Kid.
Speaking of your latest book and everything, what made you pick these four hombres to write a book about?
Well, it enabled me to be able to write about Nuevo Mexico history from the Hispano side of things from the 1850s all the way to the 1930s. If I'd based it around any other four hombres, it probably wouldn't have been able to do that. And also because with Juan Patron, he was heavily involved in the Harel War, the Horror War, the Race War. With Martin Chavez, he was the leader of the McSween partisans during the big 5-day siege. Of course, Yginio got shot during that. He was involved in that. Jose was a member of the Regulators. But, of course, Jose later was a member of Los Guardas Blancas, the Whitecaps, and he was a member of the Society of Bandits, Vicente Silva. So, and, of course, Yginio died in 1935, not 1936, like his headstone says. So I was able to take the narrative all the way to then. And, of course, as I discovered in the 3 years I worked on it, Martin Chavez lived an incredible life after the Lincoln County War. He became one of the most successful, famous businessmen in the whole territory, soon to be, eventually state of New Mexico, before he passed away. So I was able to go into all that and kind of bring bring Martin Chavez back from obscurity with that. So, I was able to write about a lot of interesting aspects throughout that, pretty much an 80-year timeline. Yeah. And hopefully, that's why I did that. I knew there was a broader story that needed to be told. And I think that book, even more than Bandido Simpatico, I think you kind of get a real sense of why the Hispanos felt so affectionately for Bonney.
Yeah.
Because he was fighting the people they considered their enemies. Right.
At what point during your research did you kind of decide, like, I want my book to be the book that really shows the Hispano point of view and really kind of gives them their due, because it's something that hadn't been done enough? What kind of made you decide to go that route?
I'll be honest, it provided me with a fresh avenue on the subject because it hadn't been done, as you said, pretty much. That was really it. It was kind of just like, even with Bandido Simpatico, I wanted to write a book about the kid. I was never going to just write another Billy book. We have enough of those come out. Right. And I thought about, what about a biography that really goes into his life, but like really into his relationship with the Hispanos? It hasn't really been done before. So I did Bandido Simpatico. And of course, when I was working and researching that, I started to get more interested in the Hispanos that I was researching points. So I went from Bandido straight into In the Days, thinking, well, there's a broader story. As soon as I finished Bandido Simpatico, I knew there was a broader story. Right. And so that just kind of one led into the other. But the primary reason, I'd love to sit here and say, it's because I feel the Hispanos deserve their due. Yeah. The truth of it is, it really started out, it just gave me a fresh approach. Yeah. And my affection for the Hispano side of things and my passion and interest for it, that developed as I was going. And by the time I got to the end of In the Days of Billy the Kid, I looked at it, at what I'd done, and I felt, if some people feel that Hispanos, their side of things should have been told, I feel I've done that now. So that's a plus to things. And I've made a lot of friends in the Hispano community in New Mexico. Rocco Lavari, who is the great-grandson of the Herrera brothers, who were the leaders of the Whitecaps. He actually sent me I'll take this over if I can show you in the dark here. This, you see that painting there? Yeah. Yeah, he sent me that. It's of Los Guardas Blancas, and those are all my dog toys beneath it. Yeah, he sent me that in the mail as a gift, like kind of as a thank you, and he sent me a photo of his grandfather holding a copy of the book, and it really touched his face, because I published a photo of his grandfather's mother in the book, and which had never been published before. And I made friends with one of Martin Chavez's great-grandsons. I made very good friends with Jose Chavez's granddaughter, who actually has a cutout of an interview I did framed on the wall in her office in New Mexico, which kind of freaked me out a bit at first. I was like, well, Yeah, but she's a lovely lady. And of course, another young man, Roberto, who's I'm friends with, who was a veteran. His great grandfather was a proud white cap, and the Hispanos that I've spoken to and gotten to know, they've all. I mean, Rocco Lavardi, he's a Chicano activist. He was born into that. He had breakfast with Dolores Huerta once.
Wow.
When he was a kid, he was born into that movement, and the Hispanos I've spoken to that I hear from, they seem to appreciate what I was trying to do and what hopefully I pulled off. They seem to like the book, and I guess really that's what really matters. If they approve, then I must have done something right.
Absolutely, man. I think it's such a great thing that you did, showcasing their perspective and everything, because a lot of people don't realize, even in Wild West culture and the old cowboy culture and all that, there's a lot of Hispano roots and things like that with the vaqueros and everything. And even to this day, there's a real Western culture out there. So it's great to see that kind of get some light shed on it and everything. And it leads me to my next question, which you might have already answered. Is like, what's been the most rewarding part of all your work so far with Billy and in the days of Billy the Kid? What's been the most rewarding part of all this?
I guess for me personally, for a selfish reason, I guess it was a lot of the new information that I managed to uncover, stuff that I wanted to learn, especially probably the biggest thrill for me was probably being able to, because I had to research his life from scratch. Right. It was pretty much Martin Chavez, being able to detail his life from start to finish as much as humanly possible in the day's book. That was probably, I went on a kind of a 3-year journey there with Martin, and that was probably the most rewarding. And I guess, having someone, the great grandson of the great grandnephew, sorry, not grandson, I said grandson, the great grandnephew of the Herrera brothers, Chicano activists, send me a painting like that as a gift, as a thanks for writing the book, coming into contact with descendants, and that's all pretty rewarding. And hopefully people who read them, they enjoy the book. So it's, I know I'm a bit crazy sometimes, but, I'm a good read, I think, sort of.
Yeah. Oh, you're a great read, man. You're a great writer. Like to have a book this thick that keeps somebody engaged and keeps them turning pages is especially when you keep it historically accurate, is no easy feat, man. It's pretty incredible.
Well, it's a foot breaker. Yeah, don't drop it on your foot.
Yeah, that's true. It's amazing, man. Well, with that said, I'll kind of wrap it up. Is there anything that you're working on right now that you want to plug or anything?
I did just have an article come out in the December issue of the Wild West History Association Journal, the December 2025, the winter quarterly. It's called Billy the Kid in the Press, and it documents how the press, the territorial press, and then the national and global press, they transformed Bonney from just another rustler into a international superstar in the space of about 6-7 months. So yeah, you can check that out. Incredible.
Well, his books are available on Amazon. They're both great reads. James, I hope to have you on the channel again sometimes, man. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
No problem, man. I'll come back. No problem at all. It was good. Thanks for having me on, man. I do appreciate it. Really.
Yes. All right, if you enjoyed that conversation, I put links to both James's books in the description. Go and pick those up. And consider subscribing, because he's eventually going to come back on the channel. And I also plan to have other authors and historians on here that I'll set down for these type of discussions. But until then, thanks for watching and see you next time.